In this week's episode, I welcome back Mercedes Van Eesen to talk about EMF pollution and geopathic stress.
From the outside looking in, it can sometimes appear that peak performers have an elusive talent or skill that sets them apart from the rest of us. However, what usually sets peak performers apart isn't what they can do, it's what they will do. You are listening to the Trading Edges Podcast, the podcast dedicated to seeking and sharing the best ideas and principles from peak performers across all domains of performance and achievement to help you discover your full trading potential.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Houston, and welcome to episode 27 of Trading Edges. Now, we're taking a break from our regularly scheduled trading programming to explore a topic that I think is a bit under the radar for most people, and that's around the topic of EMF exposure and pollution. For those of you who may not be too familiar with the concept, EMF stands for electromagnetic fields, and in and by itself, they're not really a problem. The problem is really that we as a society have rushed headfirst into the exponential creation and adoption of wireless technologies that emit these EMFs. Think microwaves, cell phones, cell phone towers, ubiquitous Wi-Fi technologies, smartwatches, smart grids, Bluetooth, etc., right? Everywhere we go nowadays, we're being exposed to high levels of EMFs, whether we know it or not. And the scary thing is that there's really been no long-term or longitudinal studies around the potential negative effects or consequences. So I won't steal too much thunder from the guest on today's show, but we're all affected on some level or another by EMF exposure, whether we feel it or not, whether we know it or not. Because fundamentally, we're all electric. Our bodies are electric. Think about it. Our nervous system operates using electricity. That's how we operate. This is why this topic matters. So in this podcast, you'll hear about and learn about what is EMF and why one should care about EMF pollution. What are some of the consequences of excessive EMF exposure and geopathic stress, and how this could affect you as a trader? Is there a way to tell if your environment is good or bad in terms of EMF exposure? Why some people are more susceptible to EMF stressors than others? And how to mitigate the stress or the risk of EMF pollution. Now, I'd love to hear your opinions around the risks of EMF exposure, so I've put up a poll over at the blog page. Now, if you go over to thetradingedge.org/episode 27, you can vote and voice your opinions on the matter. As always, I hope you enjoy the show. You can find the show notes and resources to begin to educate yourself around this topic at thetradingedge.org/episode 27. Now, on to the show. Welcome everyone to episode 27 of Trading Edges. Now, you may remember today's guest from episode 19 of the podcast. She's a trader, an internationally renowned intuitive and trading coach, and goes by the handle of the Buddhist Trader on Twitter. So, on today's podcast, we have Mercedes Oestermann Van Eesen. Mercedes, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Houston. Lovely to be here.
Of course.
Thank you for having me back.
Of course, it's great to have you back on. So I invited Mercedes back on the show to talk to us about a rather esoteric concept that we touched upon in our last conversation. And that's around this topic and kind of this growing problem of EMF pollution and potentially the widespread negative impacts it can have on all of us, especially us as traders who sit in front of computers all day. So Mercedes has been doing a lot of work around this topic, and she shared with us some stuff on our last conversation. But why don't we just start right from the beginning again? For the layperson, Mercedes, or someone who's new to this field, what are EMFs?
Well, basically, EMFs, electromagnetic fields, are naturally occurring in the Earth and around us, even in the cosmos. So, in as much as the natural part of it has been around probably ever since the cosmos existed, there hasn't really been that much of a problem. And all life forms would be able to recognize it and avoid it, build their houses away from it. There is clear evidence today that the ancient Egyptians and the Romans and all the tribal societies knew about these fields and knew also how to detect them, and they would build certainly their most important dwellings and their villages and larger towns away from these areas, and they also knew how to convert that energy from potentially harmful energy into energy that is beneficial to us. So this isn't the problem. The real problem is something that has arisen, shall we say, in earnest over the last 50 or 60 years, and that is what I call the man-made EMF, which we have created by the ever-increasing use of electronic equipment.
Right.
And that is, anything that is wireless, all our computers, mobile phones, and even something very few people realize, actually, the telephones we use in the house, which, they have got a base station, and then you can walk around with them. In fact, there is research out there suggesting that they are more dangerous than mobile phones.
Right.
So the problem is, first of all, the exponential growth of electronic equipment. It is absolutely everywhere. And it is putting pressure on human life, on animal life, and basically on all life forms. It is, in terms of strength, creating more than 1,000 times of harmful energies than natural electromagnetic fields would create. So, the impact is massive, and it is growing all the time. The problem also is it simply hasn't been fully understood or recognized because it cannot be measured with traditional scientific equipment. You can measure the basic initial, the primary waves from electromagnetic fields, and that is basically where the wave comes out of a device. But what is not understood is the secondary impact of these carrier waves, and they never go away. So when you switch your mobile phone on, for example, and it's creating a signal, that signal keeps going out there. The next person has got a mobile phone that creates a signal, and so it goes on, and it's a cumulative effect that goes, well, frankly, we have no idea how far it goes out into the ether. You could argue that it potentially could go all the way to the sun. We simply do not know. However, what we do know is the effect it has on us and on all life forms, and also on the Earth's mantle. And the Earth's mantle ultimately is also alive. It is a life form that is directly connected to us. So, and there are studies out there which clearly link the extensive use of electronic equipment to some very, very serious health issues.
Yeah, talk about some of that. So, as a person, who's sitting in front of their computer all day, and as traders, that's what we do. I mean, that's our jobs. What are some of the impacts, and what are some of the things that people would maybe be at risk of experiencing if they were sensitive to the EMF pollution?
Right. Now, if I may just first of all say, and you just said it, Houston, if they are sensitive, so there are varying degrees. Not everybody has got the same sensitivity.
Yeah.
There are reasons for it, which is an entire subject of its own, actually. So, basically, typical telltale signs are if you're beginning to feel tired, because these chaotic energies around us, they put strain on our bodies and they put strain on our minds. So you are basically sitting in an energy field that is chaotic. And the normal modus operandi for the body is to be in harmony. The torus field around us comes round in, shall we say, two semicircles, one to the left, one to the right. And that is how an environment, the energy in the environment, would behave if it were in harmony. So the resulting stress over time builds up. And I believe that is one of the issues, and that's why it is so difficult to pinpoint, or you only know about it rather later in life rather than early on, because it gradually builds up. It's sort of a stealth energy that creeps up on you, and you don't worry about feeling tired to begin with, and you think, well, that holiday will set you right. And it normally does, because you're not on your computer, you're probably going for walks and, doing other things in an environment probably that is much more natural. You certainly wouldn't be spending 10 hours every day in front of your screens.
Right.
So then as time goes on, chronic illnesses are a typical sign of electromagnetic exposure. There have been studies out there that have linked up to 90% of all cancer cases to geopathic stress and electromagnetic fields, and the two are, very closely linked. And that actually goes back way to, in the 30s, there was a German study done in Bavaria on the subject, and they couldn't understand. In this one town, in one area, people had a very high death rate of cancer, and in other areas, it wasn't that great. So, they did studies there, and it was clearly established that it was localized. And then they did a study in a hospital in Holland, which also clearly linked EMFs, geopathic stress, to cancer and also other tumors and things. Tumors, of course, are a form of cancer. So since then there have been a myriad of studies out there so we know the connection is clearly there. And
so in that case of Bavaria, was it like that specific physical location there was a lot of geopathic stress?
Yes, there was a lot of geopathic stress, and they found that there was clusters of cancer deaths, and they couldn't understand what was going on.
Right.
So they did the research, and they found there is a thing called the Curry grid. The Earth is basically linked. It's like a large meridian system. Like the body has got a meridian system, so has the Earth. And one of the ways to measure the energy going through the meridians by a guy, there were two guys actually, Curry and Hartmann, who discovered this. And of course, it's not all bad, because if the grid is clear, it's like our meridians, when they are open and they are functioning well, there is no problem. The problem arises, for humans, if we go and drink too much bubbly one evening, we probably have a hangover the next day,
Yeah.
Which is okay. The occasional hangover, everybody can live with. The problem is when you do it every night.
Yeah, it's chronic. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is literally, what is happening when you're using electromagnetic fields, and what they do, apart from the fact that they are all pervasive and everywhere, but they are also intensified in these areas where they have got superconductive highways, for the want of a better word. And these Curry grids, of course, provide that. So and when they did this study, so they found these clusters where, of course, there was a lot of very, very disturbed, chaotic energy.
Yeah.
And the bodies, of course, can't cope with this, because the body is constantly fighting against this chaotic energy, trying to re-establish a natural harmonic field, because it's what our bodies do. It's their nature to be in homeostasis and to seek balance. So when normally the body does this very well, except for when it's being polluted with all manner of toxins, eventually the normal communication between the cells starts breaking down. So, and then what you are getting, the body goes into what is referred to as fight and flight response.
Right.
So, and most of us know this, traders know this, fear. Fear is a typical fight or flight response. And what happens is a signal is sent to the brain saying, look here, alert, your life is under danger. So start shutting down. So the first thing that shuts down is the oxygen supply to the brain. So, and we all know what happens. You start putting on impulse trades. You can't read your charts properly. You don't adhere to stops, and all these things we all know. And things like, we have to take another trade. Can't walk away now. What if this is the move? And these are all fear-based reactions which happen when a system is under excessive stress.
Right.
The normal balanced reaction falls away. Now, if that happens all the time, sooner or later, well, you become mentally ill. Eventually, you become physically ill. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. I like the way that you tied that all together. That makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of alarming because it just seems like we've kind of gone exponential with our adoption of these, wireless technologies. I guess it started many, many years ago. And I remember when I was a kid, people were all scared of, of the microwave. And now it's really gone exponential since then. Everyone now has a cell phone and numerous Bluetooth devices, and everyone seems to have Wi-Fi everywhere nowadays. So what are some of the things that people can do to begin to mitigate this? So of course, we talked about in the beginning that not everyone would have the same level of sensitivity. I guess, is that kind of like first, and I know maybe it's a deep topic, but is it kind of like, if you're not everyone who's going to smoke is going to necessarily contract cancer.
No, of course not.
But certainly we know that smoking is not good for you. I guess could you use that same analogy for folks who are sensitive to EMFs? Not everyone's going to have the same level of sensitivity to EMFs, but we probably don't want to be overly exposed to EMFs if we can help it.
Yes, absolutely. Not everybody is going to become ill, or it'll take much longer to feel the effects.
Right.
And one of the reasons is to do with our conditioning at birth. So, for example, if there have been complications at birth for whatever reason, the odds are very high that the birth took place in a geopathically stressed and an EMF environment. So the body has been given the information, the cell imprint, if you like, okay, it's dangerous. So I'm living in a dangerous environment. Right. So of course this is stored in the blueprint of the baby and is then carried on as a sort of red alert as the baby becomes a toddler, grows up into life, and they live in this environment. And what quite often actually happens, and it's no different from other conditioning, that they will unwittingly seek out to live in an environment with very high electromagnetic radiation and very high geopathic stress. Why? Because the body is conditioned to that from possibly even before birth. We can go back from the moment of insemination, if you like. You have if that were to take place in a geopathically stressed place, well, basically you've had it. It's in your blueprint.
Imprinted, yeah. So so basically talking about epigenetics there and actually getting it imprinted right into your DNA.
Yeah, quite so.
Yeah.
So if that happens, then it's more difficult to recognize then, because these people, they are familiar with it. They think it's normal. There's nothing wrong with me. I might be neurotic and I may have this problem and that problem, but it's how I am.
That's just who I am, right?
Yeah, but people think they are how they are. They lack the understanding and the knowledge that no, you're not how you are. It's how you have been conditioned, and this is how you are. Unfortunately, there is something you can do about it. But of course, you need to be aware in order to be able to do something about it.
Right. So what can people begin to do? So what, if this, as a trader or someone, who just says, you know what, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I just don't believe that, all these wireless devices and all these cell towers that are around us are harmless. What are some steps that people can begin to take to begin to move towards, maybe, like we said, maybe mitigating some of these problems?
Well, first of all, I'd say, educate yourself. And, this is, what we are doing here today, I think is incredibly valuable, because this thing is so big that, we are doing something for the planet, with this conversation here, because it's affecting our ability to survive here on Earth. And, then obviously for the individual, the thing is, you can get devices. I have recently started making pyramids, and they are made with crystals and 24 karat gold, which has got wonderful healing properties, and various other metals. They are combined in a way to harmonize the field. So what we are doing here is we are using actually a form of very ancient teachings. The Egyptians understood all this, and they knew about the incredible power of gold, of crystals. They understood how the energies behaved throughout the year and under certain conditions. And, their answer was geometry and creating what are called power points, which are connecting scalar energy from the cosmos with the scalar energy which also comes from the Earth. There's something very few people know. Scalar energy also comes from the Earth. So, and crystals, under certain conditions, they behave like superconductors. And they bring in the scalar energy from the sun, as well as connect with the scalar energy from the Earth. And they, shall we say, they convert the energy and create a harmonious field around you. So, you could actually go out and buy a whole load of crystals now, and, that will help the environment tremendously. Now, the problem is, with this ever-increasing problem, you need so many crystals. And I know what I'm talking about, because I've collected crystals for years and have many around me. You need an awful lot for this kind of thing to be effective. And they also need clearing. So, if they are put together in a certain way, and the pyramids is one way of doing it, you need a lot less. You can get a little pyramid actually to sit in front of your computer, so a bit between you and the computer, and it will very comfortably harmonize a field. A tiny pyramid, which would only be about 10 centimeters tall by about 7 centimeters square, would harmonize the area of around, up to 2 meters, I would say maximum 2 meters around you, because every dwelling, obviously, and everybody's circumstances are different. But so, that can be done, and should be done. And then as they become bigger, you can create an harmonious energy grid throughout your house, and actually beyond your house into the garden of your house.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you don't necessarily have to throw away all your devices and move into the mountains, right? So there's a way to actually still live in this world that we've created for ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think most definitely there is this thing out. A lot of the environmentalists advocating we have to completely change our lifestyle. Well, I have to say I disagree with this. However, what I do believe, though, and electricity, electronic equipment, it's not going to go away overnight.
Right.
And the use is going to increase exponentially. There are new countries using them. In China, they are in their cycle still relatively young into the understanding of all these things, and it's a young industrial nation, if you like. You would tell them stop using your mobile phones when they just in the last 10 years or so discovered the wonders of electronics in all matters of life. It's not going to happen. So the answer is, what can we do? What can the individual do to do their bit to basically, clean up after themselves? It's no different from, taking the trash out. You don't go, leave all the trash lying around in your house. It goes into the bin and, gets taken care of.
Yeah.
And it's the same with dirty energy. It's no different.
And so how do you tell then if the environment that you're working in or living in is, good or bad, if you can use those terms? How can you tell? Is it just a matter of seeing how you're feeling, or is it some way to quantify, like, yeah, this is clearly I'm working in a place that has poor some bad pollution? Is there a way to tell those things?
Yes, I mean, there is a way to tell those things, and actually at the moment I have on my website, The Buddhist Trader, there is under the holistic Feng Shui section a free home vitality check. So people can go there and fill it in, and need to have an accurate address, and then it can be dowsed. And I have been doing this for years and years and years, and I also do proper home appraisals over the internet. I've worked with people in America and in South Africa and across the world for years, and and very effectively. So because in the case of geopathic stress lines, you can establish exactly where the geopathic stress line is, and then you can clear it. So it really, none of this is rocket science. It's just knowing where to look, what to go for, and then doing the right thing to remedy the situation.
Yeah. And so even if, let's say, you're in a situation where you yourself may be taking care of your environment, what happens if you live in a very crowded neighborhood or city, like in New York City or another large metropolitan, and you can't control what your neighbors are doing, and what the businesses around you are doing, and what they're kind of polluting to the environment? Can you still use these same techniques to kind of mitigate the external circumstances that are sometimes outside of your control?
Yes. Now, actually, this is very interesting, and I'm coming back to the pyramids here, because quite often you may not notice sort of the effect of other people until you get out of the environment, and then you come back in and you notice something is different. There is, we are dealing with subtle energy here, of course, and but everybody will feel it up to a degree, and you just notice something is different. There is less clarity, there is a density in the air, and one feels suppressed somehow. There are all these little telltale signs out there. And so when you get, say, if you were in the center of New York actually is very, very interesting, because in New York there is a lot of granite. Now, granite is a very, very good stone because it has what is referred to as paramagnetic abilities. And that means it is able to take in the energy from the cosmos and convert it. And I mean, I've sat in Central Park on granite rocks when I was exhausted and jet lagged, and just sitting there meditating for 15 minutes, and you can feel the energy. Okay, it doesn't last very long, because then you walk off and, stuff. 2 hours later, you are back to where you were before.
Right.
But the point being is, there are these energy spots there where you can actually feel the difference, you see. And it's now about bringing the devices. We are coming back to the pyramids. You would want, if you are sitting, shall we say, in an office block in New York, you would want more than one pyramid. However, if you just had a small pyramid, that in itself would help you with your immediate surroundings, stuff where you are sitting by your computer. You could do an entire office where you'd need, quite a large pyramid, and it would do an office potentially of 50 square feet. Have to be a fairly big pyramid. We're talking about something like 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. And then again, also, I have to say it varies depending from office to office, because these lines, if there is a geopathic stress line, the EMF will be stronger than the EMF that is just the background EMF, right, which is permeating everything.
Yeah. Because the geopathic stress line is kind of like an amplifier or kind of a conductor to...
Exactly.
Yeah. And so maybe go back again. So why exactly do pyramids and the use of crystals, why do they harmonize the environment? What is it about these structures and these materials that improve these conditions?
Well, first of all, they are totally natural. Crystals and some of the other rocks which we are using, some of them have been around for 2 billion years. That's a long time. They are a fabric of the cosmos, and they are not only here on Earth, they are on other planets in the universe. So as such, they have the ability, they are giving off an energy that communicates with the grid of the universe. It is as big as this. I mean, it may sound a bit far-fetched to some people who may be new to this, but let's perhaps be a little bit more basic, something that everybody can understand. Take a crystal. Where are crystals being used? They are used in every single computer, albeit only in minute form. They are one of the most commonly used things in modern technology. So why is that? Because of their conductivity. Mm-hmm. So we are amplifying the conductivity of the crystals if they are then put into a resonant field we want to create. And obviously we want to create the harmonic resonances of, healing resonances, like, for example, the 5 to 8 resonance, which is, the 5 to 8 hertz frequency, which is the frequency of love, the frequency of 432, and they create order. So when I create an orderly environment, energetically speaking, my life becomes more organized. My thoughts become clearer. My thoughts literally become more organized. The body becomes more organized. It goes back into homeostasis because it doesn't have to fight all this chaotic stuff around it. Because we can, the principle of entrainment is at play here. We can lower our energy and we can raise it, because that is, if you're long enough exposed to a negative energy, sooner or later you come into entrainment with that energy. And it doesn't work very well for us. There is the harmonic frequencies from a certain level upwards. They start returning, as I said, the order into our lives, into the structure of everything. They are reinitiating the regenerative process. And this is exactly what crystals and other stones, rose quartz, amethyst, and calcite is also a very, very good stone. Calcite is very high in silicon, which is very, very good. And all these things, when put together, create a harmonic force field. And this is what we're after. So, it's really not all that complicated, once you understand it all and how it works.
And so sounds like that's a top, I guess, that idea of entrainments, that's what it's about, right? So, and I think it's a really fascinating idea. Maybe for the folks who haven't heard of that idea before, you mentioned it already, but what does that mean? Like, I'll let you explain it, because I think I have an understanding of, I think I've read where you may have numerous clocks in the same house and they'll eventually find the same rhythm, right?
Yes. And they found this, there is this well-documented study which was done, I think probably 20 years ago or so, women living in a commune together, they all started having their menses at the same time. Right. So, entrainment is present everywhere. And if you take, let's say, a set of tuning forks, and you strike one tuning fork, the frequency, let's stay with the love frequency, 5 to 8. So you hit that one tuning fork, all the other tuning forks start resonating at the same frequency. You don't have to touch any of the other tuning forks. However, if you then bring a dissonant frequency into play, they all stop resonating, because they now are going into chaos. They are not expansive anymore. The system begins to shut down. It's similar to what I explained early on about how the brain functions when it goes into fight or flight. See, that same principle happens in the environment. The environment begins to shut down. Our bodies, in response, will go into resonance and also start shutting down. So of course, we are intellectually at a higher level, so we can set the intention and say, right, okay, I'm not going to be affected by this. It's dumb hard work, though. If you are in a constantly low vibrating energetic environment,
right?
I think unless you're Rasputin and somebody like this, you're going to have a tough time maintaining the energies by meditating on staying right above it all.
Right. And so I guess what these structures and these materials like crystals do is that you're putting these positively charged, or maybe that's not the right word, but I guess the ones that have the right frequencies you're looking for, surrounding yourself with those in your environment, and then you basically come to tune yourself to those levels. Is that
yes.
right?
Yes, and you did actually say that absolutely correctly, Houston. They are charged. The way I work with these things, they are made in a dedicated room. All the crystals I use, and obviously in the pyramids, they are only tiny crystals. I happen to believe it is vitally important that they come from the right source. Now, where I get my stuff from, I know where they are coming from, and I know where they have spent a lot of their time, and above all, I know that they have been mined in a way that the integral structure of the crystals, no matter how small it is, has not been destroyed. Because if it is destroyed, yes, it can still work. However, what we are after is creating a very high, the highest possible vibrational frequency, and that's a frequency where it's multidimensional, it goes beyond time and space. It's very, very powerful, and that requires that certain things are in place. So when a crystal comes to you that has been damaged, yes, it can be healed. Most people don't know how to do this, so they end up with something. Well, it'll do a job, but something is lacking. It's never going to be 100%. So if you use the right material and make sure the stuff that is used is already of the best quality, and that's, by the way, nothing to do with looks. It's purely a frequency and energetic experience. Then you are going to create something that is going to be very powerful, and it's working, and you will know because you can feel it.
Yeah.
And you can see it, of course, because it's also a visual thing. Consciousness sees. It's these things are perhaps a little difficult to explain purely from the logical mind, because it is, sort of a full body experience, really.
Yeah, this is a real fascinating topic, and I know we're just scratching the surface of this. And earlier in our conversation, you talked about the holistic Feng Shui course on your site. Can you tell us a little more about that? What is that, and what is
Yeah,
it?
sure.
What do you share there?
It's well, the holistic basically pertains to the aspect of taking certain laws in the universe which apply absolutely everywhere. And I hope that I've been able to give you a little bit of an idea of sort of what we are doing here. This is not something we are taking in isolation and put in a box, compartmentalize and say, right, it only works for this. No, if we understand it properly, like the law of resonance, for example, it applies to wherever you look. There are no exceptions. And this is what the holistic side of things is about. We are using tools. First of all, I explain exactly how energy works. I go into quite the detail of the different components of energy, and that gives people a feeling for what needs to be done in order to create harmony. And then we are looking at the aspects of how resonance physically works. What do you have to do to create that environment in your own life? And so I give some examples. We briefly talked about creating a grid, and I explain all this in detail. And I even explain how the pyramids are made, because in essence, everybody can, if they have the time and the ability to do these things, they can play with it. Some people might like to do it, and and the course also comes with a membership site, which I'm just about to upload on my website, actually. And what I'm doing there is giving people who have bought the course the opportunity to get updates, because I'm doing a lot of research into this. I find it fascinating. I love the subject, and I do believe that if we work with our environment, we are helping ourselves with many, many mental problems we may be having in our trading and other areas of our lives. So as I find out new things, I put it out in the membership area, where people can sort of find out sort of the latest I discover. So I think in that sense, it's a very, very good product, and very useful product, which goes way beyond helping yourself trade better.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like to make this point, because we are doing this for the earth, literally.
Yeah. And so how does that differ then, so let's say, from just traditional Feng Shui? So why, you explained the holistic part, what's the difference then between, the distinction between those two?
Now, the holistic Feng Shui, in order to work properly, it requires a lot of complicated astrological measurements and things. Now, with holistic Feng Shui, we do not need this, because it's all about learning to feel energy and learning how to recognize when an energy is negative and when an energy is positive, and having the tools to, shall we say, convert that energy. And that needn't be complicated. Now, traditional Feng Shui does use things like earth acupuncture and things like this, and I have got a serious issue with this, because earth acupuncture doesn't last. They use these cures like salt water. Now, that can potentially actually do a lot of harm, and you can buy these salt water cures. They accumulate negative energy very, very quickly. It's got to be dealt with in a certain way to be gotten rid of, or otherwise you are creating more negative energy in your home than getting rid of. So, and there are lots of other things. Actually, I explain that in the course in great detail. Sort of my problems with it. And I think also today we need solutions which we can, once in place, that need relatively little maintenance.
Right.
Of course, as everything is in flux, you have to do a bit of maintenance. It's just like tidying up your desk. You can't leave it indefinitely, and the same goes with, clearing up the energy in your house. But it is much more straightforward than traditional Feng Shui.
Yeah, I was just curious about that. Just coming from an Asian background, I'm familiar with some of the concepts of Feng Shui, so I've never heard that term holistic Feng Shui, so I was curious to
No, because
see how
I
that came
haven't, because I made it up.
about. Good answer.
It's my new trademark.
I like that. I made me very curious, so I was very curious about that. So we're coming up on our time, but I did want to ask you one question, which we touched upon even on the last call. But so what's the role of water in all this? We talked about in the last podcast that water obviously has its own crystalline kind of similarities. So what's the role of water, and how does that play into all of what we're talking about?
Right. Now, actually, water is absolutely vitally important to take in water that is structured and that is alive. And, with everything I have explained early on, now, of course, our water has become lifeless. And we all know this when we look at, fish dying, radioactive areas in seas and still around certain areas in Japan. Now, all that can be dealt with, I have to say. It is not utterly impossible. It's not even rocket science. It's just, being able to do it. And you can actually at home do your own restructuring of water. And now you can actually put your water glass on plates, on harmonizing plates. Actually, I've made some. They are not for sale on my website yet, but for those who are that way inclined, they can make them with crystal, getting certain crystals, selenite, and various other stones. Gold, always use 24 karat gold, because it's just such a powerful thing. And you put your glass of water on it, it tastes different.
Yeah.
After 10, 20 minutes, it's an entirely different taste. And there are water filters out there you can buy, which are very, very effective. I know they don't come cheaply, but they can be attached to the mains of the water, and they really recrystalline, re-energize the water and bring harmony into the crystalline structure of the water. So, there are different ways of doing it. I feel it's very, very important to use devices, but not only our drinking water, but other water as we pour it down the sink. If it's cleared of cell memory and has got healing energies in it, we are regenerating the sort of water system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really fascinating topic, and I think what we talked about today, for many people, it's probably flying under the radar. This topic of EMF and water is probably not a mainstream topic, but I just really feel that the consequences from all these things we're beginning to feel them more and more in our lives nowadays. As Mercedes talked about the issues of mental illness and cancers and distractibility and the kind of fear. So it feels like to me that it's going to take some time, but I think we're going to hit that critical mass at some point where enough people begin to get it to say, yeah, this is actually a problem, and we need to really begin to think about some big solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important that one does talk about it, because you cannot do anything about anything unless you are aware. And I think
Yeah.
the big problem is people know they are not feeling right.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all these viruses around, and, I mentioned early on, I do these free home vitality checks. And, none of it comes as a surprise to me, what I read. And I have done, I don't know, hundreds of these things. And I've tested, I couldn't tell you how many houses, and cleared houses, physically, gone into houses, from entity attachments to, people arguing with each other, and all sorts of things. It can be dealt with. People don't know where to look. So unless one educates them, how are they going to know?
Right. Yeah, well said. So it all begins, as all things, with awareness. So where would be, let's wrap things up. So if people want to learn more, Mercedes, about this topic and are interested in your course, where can they find out more about that, and where can they follow you?
Well, if they go to thebuddhisttrader.com, it's my website. And as I say, there is the free home vitality check for anybody who is interested. There is obviously the Feng Shui, holistic Feng Shui course on there, and the pyramids, and all the other things I do. And I write a blog, a regular blog, where a lot of this information I'm also putting out there. My YouTube channel can be accessed from my website, and my Facebook, and and Twitter you mentioned early on as well.
Cool. Well, as I told Mercedes before our call today, I'm definitely interested in one of those pyramids that she hand makes. So I'm going to be reaching out to her after our conversation today, and maybe seeing if I can get my hands on one of them. But as last time, Mercedes, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great deal of fun and very, very fascinating.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you. And as usual, folks, if you want to find the show notes and you want to see the resources we talked about on today's show, you can go to thetradingedge.org/episode 27. Once again, Mercedes, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Houston.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. By the way, I sent out a weekly newsletter where I share my latest insights, as well as articles, videos, and performance tips and tricks that have caught my attention during the week. So, if you're interested, come over to the blog at thetradingedge.org to sign up for my weekly newsletter.
You've been listening to the Trading Edges podcast. We've taken this interview and summarized all the big ideas so that you can take action. Just head over to thetradingedge.org/podcast to find the show notes, transcript, resources, and to continue the conversation.